Hi, I'm Naomi Light, and my conversation this week is with the very lovely George Gettas. George died on the operating table in 2011, and quite naturally his life completely changed. He found a connection with a deeper purpose to empower other people, and particularly to empower women. So he became a coach, and obviously we had a lot to chat about. We talked particularly about how the subconscious mind runs our automatic program and George's steps to understand ourselves and to move into more health and wellness. There was one particular quote of George's that I really loved. He said that in order to find fulfillment, everybody needs to find a way to serve and give themselves away. It's a fantastic truth, and one I wish more of us lived with every day. So I hope you really enjoy my conversation with George Gettas.
Great. Oh, so good to have a conversation with you, George. Welcome to my YouTube channel.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
So I've been following you on Instagram.
Yes.
And you post a lot about your work with women as a coach.
Yes.
And particularly what caught my eye was the inspiring quotes about empowering women. So why don't you just tell me, George, how you came to be doing this and what it is that you are wanting to do with your coaching work?
Okay. You asked about three questions in that one question. So I'll start off by giving you this 2-minute overview of who I am and what I am. I grew up in a city near Toronto in Canada. I graduated from a prestigious business school. I became a tax accountant for 20 years. I was an investment advisor for 20 years. And then I had my turning point happened in March of 2011 when I had with a heart operation and got triggered 2 heart attacks, and I died a couple times and got zapped about 15 times. And as I'm recovering from that, and obviously I recovered, as I'm recovering from that, you're very Zen-like. And the Zen-like feeling was, okay, smart guy, it would have been real simple not to be here. But the fact that you're here, I'm taking that as a message from the cosmos that you've got something important left to do. And so figure out what it is. So I left the hospital after way too much time and started on 2 paths. The first path was cardiac rehab. The second path was figuring out what it was. After about 4 years, I stumbled onto coaching. And I went to a coaching course that took about a quarter of a year. And in the second session, they asked, who is your ideal client? What are you trying to do? Or what's the thing? And a lot of people said things like, I'm the lighthouse that, guides people home, this kind of stuff. And I wrote down, I coach women. And it was just as simple as that. Now, where that came from, there was not a lot of thought at the time. I've given thought to it afterwards as to why that is and come up with some ideas. I've got about 15 to 20 reasons for why women as opposed to coaching guys. But the main one revolves around 2 little vignettes from my life. The first vignette was my dad grew up in a little tobacco town in southwestern Ontario, where to say that the locals did not do different well was an understatement. My dad is of Greek descent and got beat up every day for being Greek. He was different. And so that, and then fast forward about 30 years and I'm in a bigger city in southwestern Ontario. And I'm being embraced for being Greek. I was the golden Greek in my school, and my dad couldn't understand that concept. And that taught me sort of 2 things. 1, difference can hurt, and 2, different can change. And then the second vignette was when I graduated from business school, this was in 1970, there were 2 women out of 56 in my class. Now, I had gone through school with the smart kids, and I knew that at least half, maybe more, was in the female form, and they didn't get dumb overnight. So this 2 out of 56 made no sense to me. And I grew up as a tall, smart, thin, white guy, and I never had anybody other than myself tell me what I couldn't do. But this is not what women experience all the time, and it's still not what women experience. And so I'm doing my little bit to try to level the playing field. So that is sort of an overview of me and how I got to what I'm doing.
Yeah, which I'm sure would have taken considerable thought and exploration on your own end, even though you said it just as a kind of, you know, reeled off a few examples. I guess that space in your life where you were recovering from the cardiac arrest, did you use that to reflect on why and how and who you really were?
The answer is yes, but I'll tell you another story. And that story is that when I'm doing my rehab and trying to figure out what it was, my daughter suggested that I take the Strength Finders test and come up with my top 5 strengths. And so I did that, got the results, and said, these make absolutely no sense to me. This just doesn't compute in my head. So I put it in a drawer and forgot about it. And then in June of 2015, I started coaching, and I had some, 2, 3, 4 women that I was coaching. And by Christmas of that year, so 6 months later, I would say to all of them, I know that a relationship has been created. I know that it's a deep relationship, et cetera, et cetera. But what am I doing to create it? Like, what is it that I'm doing? And at that time, I found the Strength Finders report in the drawer and pulled it out and said, oh, that's what it is. Because all the strengths were all around relationships. And having been a finance guy before, that made no sense before, but it makes sense now. And when you look back and I always say that for everybody, there's footprints in the sand as to, what you're designed to do. And there's examples, but you just have to be smart enough to know what they mean. That I was using those personality and relationship strengths. And, so that's what I do. And so I believe I say that I've got 2 superpowers. One is the one-on-one relationship like this. And then the second one is I have the ability to see the genius in you, to see where your greatness lies. And I see you sort of over here. You are sort of here. I apologize for on the screen because whatever. But, and what I do is I drag you kicking and screaming from where you are to where I see you as. And how do I see you like that? I have no idea. I just do. It just is there. And so those are my superpowers.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that. The way that weaved back into your self-perception. So I was reading on your Instagram account, George, that it says, I guide high achieving women on a journey from being stuck to fulfilled.
Correct.
So I'm a high achieving woman.
Yep.
Supposing we were to sit down a bit like this, what are the ways in which you would guide somebody like me from being stuck? Because doubtless there are lots of places in which I am stuck.
Right.
Into fulfillment. Just like talk through some of the steps of what you're looking for.
Okay. Let me give you the overview, and then I'll give you sort of 4 steps, and then we go from there. Okay. The overview is when people are born, I believe, this is my own theory, I believe that you're pure essence, pure potential, designed to do something unique and special. And then what happens as that, and hand in hand with that uniqueness and specialness is happiness, because as you know, babies when they're dry and fed and whatever are happy. And then what happens as that child grows, well-intentioned adults, and I got air quotes, well-intentioned adults, teachers, friends, etc., start telling the child what they can't do, right? You're not smart enough, girls don't do this, girls don't do math, all that kind of stuff. And what happens is this negativity starts building what I call scar tissue around your essence. And then what happens is you start living from the scar tissue and not from who you really are, from your essence. And when you're living from scar tissue, you're living from somebody else's life, not your life. And so what the overview of what I try to do is two parts. One, define who you are, what's your essence, what your special thing is. And second one is to break down the scar tissue. And one of the things, and everybody is different, and you know that. You've interviewed so many people, and everybody is unique, and everybody comes from a different place. But the one thing that is common in all the women that I've coached is that over time, they become happier. And it's happened 100% so far. And my understanding, or my hypothesis, is that as you start breaking down the scar tissue and acting like you really are, you become happier, because happiness goes hand in hand with your essence. So that's the overview. And so there are, in my process, there are 4 steps. Step number 1 is what's your special sauce, what's your genius, who are you designed to be? 2 is what's the scar tissue that's holding you back? 3 is what are the attributes that light you up? Step number 4 is what can you do to incorporate the things that light you up? And then you rinse and repeat on 3 and 4, right? You try something and you say, okay, this worked, oh, this didn't work, that really sucked. And then you say, what can I do that would try to give me more of what I like and less of what I don't like, right? So that's the overall premise. Yeah. And so those are the steps. Now, the thing is that nobody's mind is able to go from step 1 and then step 2 and then step 3 and step 4. So if we were going to be in a coaching situation, what we do, all I get you to do is talk, because I have crazy listening skills, and I don't, when we talk, my prefrontal cortex is not engaged. The conversation is between you and my subconscious, where my genius lies. And my mouth is just being used by my subconscious to talk. There's lots of times where I'll say something and I'll say in my head, oh, that was cool. Where did that come from? Yeah. Right? It just came out of whatever is back there. And so so what I try to do is get you to talk. And then I look for what I call loose socks. Now, the loose sock comes from being in the dryer and finding one sock and you not knowing where the other one was, right? 2 went in, but you only have 1. And so when you talk, I'm looking for something that is in one of the 4 steps, right? It's some indication of who you are, or some indication of your scar tissue, or some indication of what lights you up. And we just talk about it. Right? We just talk. And if it's interesting to me, I sort of pull the string on that one to say, well, where did that come from? And what does it mean? And, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, there's no preparation, there's no whatever, but it gets you to I'm getting a free form, sort of a brain dump of stuff that you believe in. And then I try to put them into the boxes and whatever. And it just is a evolutionary situation over time where, the concept of a paint by numbers Do
Yes.
you, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
Well, this is like a paint by numbers, right? We have a little dab of paint here and a little dab of paint here and a little dab of paint. And after a while, there's a picture of who you really are, starts popping up. And we start saying, and all along, I'm constantly saying to you, because I've had this picture of where your genius is, and, you know, because something has really triggered me. And the thing about genius, especially, you know, people's genius, is that you're the last one to get the memo as to what it is. Because for you, it is the most common thing in the world because you've been doing it forever. You don't think about it. It's just, and you think, well, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And that's not true, right? And so I see from the outside that, you know, it takes literally about 5 minutes to get some indication of where the genius lies. And then you just, you know, keep going over time to make sure that, yes, you're right and whatever. And then I keep coming at them and saying, you have no idea how good you are. You have no idea how impressive this is. Because you know, and I know, that if you sit in with me, you'll know right away what I'm really good at, because you sit there and go, wow, I could never do that in 1,000 years, right? That is unbelievable. But to me, it's the most common thing in the world. I've been doing it forever. What's the big deal? And so, you know, it's not magic on my part. It's just, you know, just observation and whatever. So that's sort of an overview of what I do.
Yeah,
hopefully that makes sense to you.
Oh, complete sense. And I know that people watching this will be beginning to see themselves in that, you know, 4-step process and thinking, do I know what my genius is? And I was just going to reflect really that there is something so special about the one-to-one relationship where somebody who's close enough to see into your soul, but is not you, is not bound up in your own consciousness,
right,
can be like a mirror and reflect back to you things that you just can't see for yourself, you know, without the mirror.
Right. There's a book called The Power of the Other by a guy by the name of Dr. Bloom, Bloom, and he's a psychologist. And in the first part of the book, he tells a story about he had gone from being in finance at university, and then he's found psychology and he was doing a postdoc course. And the prof walked in and said, we have back tested every possible, you know, method of psychology, and we found one that gives more results than all of the others combined. And so everybody, you know, ready to take notes. And he says it's the power of the relationship between the client and the therapist. And the reason for that is just what you said, is that it's that the trust and the feeling that, because I'm running ramshot through your brain, right? And so, you know, the relationship is such that you're telling me what you're really thinking, which you almost never do. And you have to trust that I'm not going to abuse it, and I'm only doing it for you. You know, if we're in a coaching relationship, I don't care about me. The only person that is of any importance is you. And so that's my number one goal is just trying to get you to see where your genius lies and how good you can possibly be. And when you figure that out, fulfillment comes when you use your genius outside of yourself to help others, right? So, you know, the easy part about fulfillment is you have to help others. The harder part is how you do it. And so that's part of steps 3 and 4 type thing, right? So anyway.
I have about 6 questions now. This is so interesting.
Yeah.
So, one thing I was thinking was, I coach people, but also I have been coached by some wonderful people.
Right.
And I know this kind of special kind of vulnerability that comes over you when you're sat in that chair, just ready to be dissected by somebody else. who you know can see into you what you cannot see about yourself. And I find it very unnerving. I think of myself as pretty self-assured, but oh my goodness, I find that so unnerving. And for people who maybe have a very good reason to not trust, or who've been hurt in the past, or who just find the lack of confidence they have keeps them from putting themselves in that place. What have you seen helps people to trust in a coaching relationship?
That's an interesting question, because as you're saying what you're saying, I'm going, what, is that happening inside of the head of the women that I'm coaching? And the answer is, I don't know. And so one of the things I'm going to start doing is asking about that. But my feeling is, and again, this is my feeling, and there's, I haven't talked about it for whatever, is that whatever my superpower is on a one-to-one relationship, it reduces the fear of being vulnerable, because all we're doing is talking.
Yeah.
And right, it's just a conversation. And very few people get to talk about themselves, and very few people get to talk about the truth about themselves. Yeah. And again, my basic, and what I try to do is I try to turn the women that I coach into daughters, right? And so I adore them. And one of the things that I always used to say is I would fall in love with the women I coached. Yeah. And then I read a book dealing with flow, right? The concept of flow, being in the zone, right? Yeah. And when I meet face to face with the women I coach, I'm in flow. And what my reading has told me is that when you're in flow, it dumps all sorts of brain chemicals into your head, which is very akin to the brain chemicals that fall in your head when you fall in love. Mm. And so what I was feeling from a psychology point of view makes sense, right? Yeah. And so that's what I'm trying to do. So the feeling that I have that they are daughters sort of hopefully takes away some of the fear that you were talking about being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I'm sure it does. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that you are doing in terms of setting boundaries and creating safety that will mitigate against all those fears.
It could be. And the thing is I just do what I do and what makes sense for me.
Yeah.
And what I would do if I was coaching my daughter or talking to my daughter, and it's the same type of deal. So, but I'm going to have to start asking, because you asked a question that I don't know the answer to.
Yeah. No, do ask, because I think even getting to the point of sticking your hand up and saying, George, please, could you be my coach? That takes a lot of courage for people.
Oh, that takes a lot of guts.
Yeah. And I think, and being able to see kind of this kind of little window into what a session with you would like, what you were trying, amongst other coaches, what you were trying to do, and the genius, the magic behind the one-to-one environment enables people to take that step, to step across the chicken line and be brave.
Right. One of the things also is, and I know you know this, is that when you have, and I say you, I mean anybody, has a problem that they're worrying about, or they've got to worry, or they've got some kind of baggage, it takes up all the space in your head. Yeah. It just wall to wall. But when you talk about it, it comes out, and all of a sudden it just shrinks and goes poof. And you sit there and go, what was I worried about, right? What's the big deal? Right? And one of the things is that you tell me your darkest secret, and I go, yeah, what's the problem? I didn't run away. I wasn't, I still want to talk to you, all this kind of stuff. So it's not as big a deal as you're, making it up to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you can get to the point where you are confident enough and vulnerable enough to tell me what those secrets are, then it's beneficial, right?
Yeah, Oh yeah. This the shame of it, the kind of, there's something wrong with me because I've got this
Right,
experience or this problem, that just
right,
evaporates, doesn't it? The first
right.
time that you
Yeah,
articulate to somebody,
yeah, yeah.
help.
Yeah, let me tell you about the first aha moment I ever had. And this was back when I was about 15, so it was about 500 years ago. Um, I I had every family is dysfunctional, and mine was no different. And my way of dealing with the dysfunction was to sit in my room and read. And you know, I became buddies with people like Napoleon Hill and Dale Carnegie and Earl Nightingale and Zig Ziglar and all those self-help people. So I've been reading that stuff forever. And I remember it as clear as day. I got this bolt out of the blue, and I read and then understood the following. And the following said, you have no control over what happened to you in the past, but you have 100% control over how you react to it now. And as soon as that sunk in, I was free, because the dysfunction wasn't me, but how I reacted to the dysfunction was all on me. So I wasn't a victim anymore. I had control. And so I created a plan of how I was going to get out of dysfunction and did so. So that was, thing. And that is and I know you've seen it. You know the concept of coaching magic, when something changes just like that.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing with coaching magic is that it's like going from one room to another through a door that locks when you go through it. You
Yeah.
can't go back, right? So you're the new person from right away,
Yeah.
and that's what happened in that case. And and so this is all the things. Let me tell you another story.
Yeah.
I had a client, and we were meeting every 2 weeks, and she came back one time just a little upset. And I said, okay, what's the story? What's your problem? And she said, you know what? I've had bosses, I've had mentors, I've had sponsors, I've had professors, I've had teachers, I've had parents, I've had friends, and nobody has ever told me that it's all mental. And what she meant by that was, and I had been telling her about, there's a Henry Ford quote that says, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
Right. And that's the all mental part. Right. And she tested it out, because I had been telling, because she had sort of been in the negative realm, and I was talking that it's a mindset. Right. And so she found herself one day in the negative realm and said, okay, I'm going to see if he knows what he's talking about. So she says, I'm going to think good things. And all of a sudden, her mood changed, the world changed, everything got brighter. And she did that a couple of times. And she says, oh, where has this been? Right? And so one of my mantras that I'm always using, and you'll see it on Instagram all the time, is it's all mental. And because once you figure out that game and get your mind working in the right way, things are a lot easier for you. And as I said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
I wonder, George, if you'd talk a little bit more. I was fascinated by what you said about your own subconscious mind.
Sure.
And how when you coach, you are in flow. You're not listening with your prefrontal cortex, you're listening with your subconscious mind. And I think, I don't know if you teach your clients how to do this, but I wonder if you'd say some things about how did you come to allow that to happen? Is it quite natural for you, or have you worked at being in flow and using your subconscious mind?
There's a lot of parts to try to answer that question. The first part is, how many times do you really want to listen to what's going on, right? Like a lot of stuff is just, you can, a quarter of your brain, you can follow it along and whatever. And the one thing that I did had to do some training for, and it was that when you when you're talking and I'm listening, totally listening, I don't, you know how you a lot of times you're trying to come up with what the next question is. Well, in my case, I got myself not to do that. I trained myself that as I got to a point where I know that as soon as you've done talking and answering what the last question was, another question will come up, based on whatever, things that triggered my subconscious. And so, and that is just how it works. Now, do you meditate?
Yes.
Okay. In meditation, the premise is you're trying to stay in the now, following your breathing. And the skill is to notice when you get away from the now and bring it back. And so that's what the whole premise is. Now, if we have a 2-hour conversation in what I call when I'm in my flow, I might be present for all but maybe 5 minutes. Now, when I meditate, my brain is like a puppy on speed seeing a squirrel. It's all over the place. But when I'm having this conversation, I am totally here virtually all the time, which is, I haven't figured out the why for that, but I know it happens. And there's lots of times where, you think that it's been half an hour, 45 minutes, and it's been 2 hours or 3 hours. It just goes, like that, time goes away. And that's one of the attributes of flow, is that time stops.
Mm.
And so, and then I had a conversation about a month ago with a neighbor, and he was talking about his listening skills and what he does. And to stay in the now, what he does, and he was trained to do, is that everything you say out loud, he says inside his head, right? So he's repeating everything you say to stay in the now. I don't need to do that. I just stay in the now. And so how do I have that skill? I have no idea, but I know I've got it.
And just being able to accept that it is what it is without the complexity of needing to explain it means you can operate in that
Right.
flow and when you're with people.
Right.
So some other questions. I'm kind of now jumping back a little bit into the conversation, but you've said so many things that I want to ask you about that it's going to get jumpy. The second part of your 4-step process is you said that you dissolve the scar tissue. I think you said dissolve. You get
away with, break it up.
Break up
the scar tissue.
Scar tissue. Yeah. And then you started talking about how it's all mental and we can just think differently about the situations that we have encountered. Can you give us any more insight into what is happening for clients in that process of breaking down the scar tissue as they converse with you? Or examples when that you know that's happened?
Everybody's different, right? So everybody has different scar tissue. But almost, excuse me, almost nobody can get out of childhood or teenagehood without some version of "I'm not good enough" floating through their head. Now, I was a charter member of that club. I had it in spades. I've got it now reduced to a little bit, but it's still there. But once what we do, like, let's deal with that one. Let's say you have "I'm not good enough" floating around in your head. Well, when we investigate it, then we say, okay, give me examples of how you're not good enough. How do you know that? Because then I'll start saying about what you are really good at. Now, the reality is you're not good at everything, right? But you're good at what you're good at, right? And those are the things that you have to deal with, right? Like I have sort of a saying that says, you can work on your weaknesses and you might get to average, or you can work on your strengths and you might get to awesome. It's up to you. And so we just talk about that type of thing. here are the things you've really done really, really, really well. And you got to start giving yourself credit for it, right? And I keep saying over and over and over again, you're the last one to get the memo about how good you are. And then what finally happens is they start saying, oh, maybe he's right, right? This is an old guy who's seen a lot of stuff at different levels of business. And maybe he knows what he's talking about. So maybe I'll start to believe it, right? And it's like turning an ocean liner around. It doesn't happen like that. This is not one of those coaching magic deals. This one is, happens over time and slowly and slowly and slowly, but it does happen. And then what you start to see is that you start seeing those people starting going on Instagram, giving, messages about what they've been overcoming, right? Type thing. And then you sort of know, now I know it's really starting to sink in, type thing. So.
Yeah, it is fantastic when you see it show up in somebody's life, the hard work they've been doing on themselves. Right. And you remember a bit like the door locking illustration that.
Right. And the thing that the reality is, and you know this, and I know this, is that I can't make you do anything. You're the one that has to make all the changes. You're the one that has to decide. You're the one who has to do things differently. All I can do is, tell you where I think you're really good at, and this is quite spectacular, and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. But you're the one that has to do all the hard work.
Yeah, which is a sobering thought. It's all the responsibility is with us, but an empowering thought as well, because the responsibility is with us, so you can.
Right. As I said in my aha moment, it's all up to you. It's how you react to it. It's how you change your mental, what goes inside your head, what's going on inside your head, whatever. Because going back to Henry Ford, if you think you can and you think you can't, you're right. And so we try to get you to go from the can't stage to the can stage.
Yeah. So another question. Outside of a one-to-one coach, which you and I fully believe in, and would recommend to anybody, are there other practices that either you do for yourself or that the clients you coach do that you see to be particularly powerful at changing somebody's mental state and helping them move through that process to fully aligned to who their genius?
There's a couple, just with the ones I'm coaching now. One woman that I coach has grown up sort of in a negative environment and was in the negative camp. And today is day 300 in this exercise that we're going through. And what I do is I send her an email every day saying, what are the 3 things you're grateful for? And tell me what things today lifted you up and what things today drove you down, right? Made you sad, made you whatever. And the gratitude one, obviously, the benefit of gratitude and what it does. But the second one, the awareness part, is like the awareness with regard to your meditation. It's noticing, because you can't change something. Sorry, let me go back a step. The things that are your scar tissue are automatic. They happen automatically. You have no control over them happening. The only way, and your subconscious speaks to you, not by words, but by feelings. And so you have to be aware enough to know when there's a negative feeling and to be aware and say, oh, that's interesting. What is that telling me? And so this is the exercise of getting her to be aware of what lifts her up and what drives her down. So that's sort of one of them. There's another woman I coach who's in the process of going through a coaching program. And this program has got NLP in it, which is not, I know what it is, but I've never really done it. But I think it makes all sorts of sense. So watching them go from where, I leave them and watch them branch out as to what they find is just truly astounding. You just, because, where they think they're going to go is going to be different than you would have ever dreamed they're going to go, because it's their life and what their experiences are as opposed to what yours are. So
yeah. I have this phrase I come across that sort of symbolizes that coaching relationship, which is, my ceiling is your floor.
Right.
And the idea that you kind of take somebody as far as you can take them, but then you expect them to kind of be propelled beyond that.
Right.
And that's a real joy to see for people like you and I who love to empower other people, to kind of see them go beyond. And I never could do that, but look at you, you're completely crushing it.
Right. And that's just because everybody's different, everybody's unique, and everybody's got different skills and talents and genius. And, you just let it fly, right? You're just letting them loose, and, where they go with it, it's astounding to watch. I also create, this is for obviously the people in Toronto, I create a group. It makes no sense. Sorry, let me go back a step. It makes no sense to me if I've done coaching with somebody to let them go away and never see them again. That just seems somewhat dumb. And so what I've started last year, and I'm going to continue this year, is having get-togethers, or what I call, the best women that I know. And, if I like you and I like Sarah and you might like each other, right? And so, and that's what I do. It's my own little get together and, meeting and networking event type thing. And so that's also, I in addition to being, I also love connecting. I love connecting, you to somebody who can use you, or, whatever type thing. And that's fun to me also.
Yeah. Well, with the technology that we have for connecting with each other, there's even more ways of doing that now, aren't there?
There certainly is. Yeah.
Wonder if your Toronto meet could become a virtual global meet for.
that requires me to know how to do it, but yeah. The difficulty I had just to get on Zoom and get to this meeting. So
yeah, we have to get you some techie sidekick so that you can we can empower you to do this genius even more.
Yeah, exactly.
So, George, I wanted to ask you, I really love to find out from the people I interview, books or resources or particular personalities that have inspired, made the difference, changed lives. Do you have anybody personally for you in your journey, books that you've read that you will never be the same again because you've read them?
I've been reading this personal development stuff since I was about 15, right? So that's about 57 years ago. I have a birthday next week, so I'll be 72 next week. And so I've been reading, and so, the standard ones like Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill, and How to Win Friends and Influence People with Dale Carnegie, and The Secret with Earl Nightingale. There's some that no one's ever heard of that were really good. One was a book called Bunkhouse Logic, B-U-N-K, House Logic. It's sort of, and it was by Ben Stein. And what the theory is that if you're a cowboy and you have to take your cattle from Texas to St. Louis, you've got no option about taking a day off. You just have to do it, right? You have to figure out all the way of making it happen. That made all sorts of sense to me, right? Like that's a logic. And then I'm rereading a book right now, is called Don't Tell Me It's Impossible Until I've Already Done It, by Pam, I think her last name is Lontos, Lontos. And this is a lady who, as it happens, is of Greek descent, who got in a bad marriage, was depressed for 5 years and stayed in bed for 5 years, and then finally turned herself around after having listened to tapes and whatever by Zig Ziglar, and turned herself into a sales powerhouse. that makes all sorts of sense to me. Then there's all sorts of recent books that are just, fabulous books that almost everything has got something in it that's worth taking and using and whatever type thing. But those are the two ones that no one's heard of that, that I really like.
Great. I will make a note of those and link in the show notes so that people can follow those up for extra reading.
Sure. Thank you.
So I think I've asked all my questions. I maybe have just one more that I'd love you to say if you've got anything on this. Have there been any remarkable turnarounds that you've witnessed with women?
That was exactly the question if you weren't going to ask it, I was going to tell it to you.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And the answer is yes. The young lady who is the one who's going into coaching, when we started, she had low-grade anxiety. She had a irritable bowel syndrome, and she had various things like this. And what she reported back is that after a period of time, they went away. Now, she had been dealing with the irritable bowel thing for 15 years, something like that. And it just is by getting her mental state better, some of that worry goes away. And when that worry and stress goes away, some of the physical ailments go away. And, so that is the most amazing one that I can give you an example of.
Oh, that's fab, isn't it? The body-mind connection.
Yes.
It's a complete mystery to me.
It's a serious mystery, and that's the mindset or the idea that you need Eastern medicine and Western medicine together makes a lot of sense, right? Just based on things like that.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Oh, listen, thank you so much for giving your time to me to ask you these questions and to hear your fascinating story. It's just been a delight.
Naomi, it's totally my pleasure. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I will be back next week with some more interviews and some more thoughts on life and how to live well. In the meantime, I'd love you to subscribe to my channel and follow me on social media. Bye.